Hello, and welcome to this set of videos focused on good trouble. In scientific ethics, we will discuss a range of controversial scientific topics that can be viewed from a variety of perspectives. When we examine the ethical implications of the science and technology in order to promote the adoption, or in some cases the banning, of new technologies, we are faced with a situation where there are no concrete right or wrong answers. I can guarantee that you will not always agree with the statements made by others or by me in these discussions, and that's a good thing. In this class and in life, we are all going to interact with people that we don't agree with, so it's important that we are able to civilly and respectfully disagree with one another. In this set of videos, we examine how to present substantive points from our perspective in order to discuss the different viewpoints of view. In reality, you can think of these videos as a tutorial on how to write strong, persuasive essays and constructive discussion comments. Now, I'm titling this set of videos Good Trouble in recognition of the words of U.S. House of Representative member John Lewis, who was also a monumental civil rights advocate. If we take a look at his own words, he says, "Never, ever be afraid to make some noise, to get in good trouble, necessary trouble." Now, from John Lewis's standpoint, it meant standing up for injustice. In the perspective of this course, kind of looking at it in a lower stakes situation, but basically learning to build those skills so that we can disagree with one another. We can argue substantively about the concepts of an issue rather than attacking individuals. And I think that's an important thing, and that's an important skill that I want to build within this course with you. Now, the focus is to have strong, substantive comments and discussions about the concepts that we are addressing within this course. And so what that means is that I'm looking for you to be able to do a critical commentary on the topics that we're going to be discussing. And so if I expect you to be looking at this in a critical way, we really need to make sure that we understand what is the definition of a critical commentary. So at a very basic point, a critical commentary is an oral or written presentation on a specific topic. So within this class, we're going to be looking at not really oral, but in discussion comments or written essays. It explains ideas from multiple perspectives. So again, recognizing that there are alternative points of view related to all of the topics that we're going to be addressing within the course. A critical commentary is supported by evidence. So using references, using examples, using evidence to support your point of view in order to show that there is some basis for the arguments that you're making rather than simply kind of an emotional or superficial response. It makes clear and pertinent points, so distinct points that are going to be advancing your argument, advancing your position. And ultimately, because we're looking at this as a critical commentary without concrete right or wrong answers, it is going to offer an opinion which you can basically think about as being a conclusion. Now, the concepts associated with critical inquiry or critical commentaries is a much higher level of understanding that you're often going to see in many of your other courses. And so what I've got here is Bloom's taxonomy. And so this is a pyramid or a chart that is used in education to look at different levels of understanding. And so in many of your classes, you need to memorize in order to retain and recall the information. Maybe you're going to have to describe or summarize something kind of in the area of understanding. But what I'm looking for is a much deeper understanding of the material. And so we're going to be focusing in at this higher end of the pyramid here. We're going to be analyzing by comparing and contrasting the concepts involved. We're going to be evaluating, kind of assessing or judging in order to make decisions based on the evidence that's available. And then ultimately, in the final project in this course, you're going to be creating using existing information to present your viewpoint. Now, it's important to recognize that in many of the classes you've taken so far, there are concrete right or wrong answers. And so we can think about this. Right, it's a correct answer. It's based on fact, based on truth in some way. or if we're looking at potentially a behavior, it is something that is acceptable to society and could be considered legal in relationship to the rules and the laws that are within society. So you can think about those right things as being kind of a yes signal. In contrast, the wrong responses or the wrong ideas or the wrong positions, when there are right or wrong answers, would be incorrect. It would be something that's not based on fact, and so you can think about it as not being based in truth, in essence being false. Again, if we're taking a look at behaviors that are considered wrong within society, they're generally going to be unacceptable to society or viewed as being illegal within the rules or laws of a community or society. And so we can think about a wrong answers as being kind of the example of no, in contrast to the right answer of yes. So when we take a look at this, we can have questions of right versus wrong. So we can ask the question, who was the first president of the United States? So how is it that we would answer that question? So when examining a right versus wrong question, basically coming up with a true statement or a false statement, what we're going to do is basically collect the information, analyze that information that we've collected, so considering the source, comparing and contrasting the evidence that's available, and then evaluating that information in order to make a judgment on what is the most correct answer in this given situation. So when attempting to come up with a right versus wrong answer for this question, who was the first president of the United States, we're going to collect some information. In this case, we've got a dollar bill with the first president of the United States, George Washington, on it. And so that would be an example of evidence that would support the first president of the United States. So in attempting to answer the question, who was the first president of the United States, we may have collected additional information, hopefully more reliable information than simply looking at a dollar bill. And so here is the title page from a Journal of the American Revolution article from 2015, asking the question, George Washington or John Hanson, who was the first president? And here's a published journal asking the question and providing evidence for their position. So we need to learn who was John Hanson, because he's not prominent in at least the histories that I learned of the American Revolution era. So based on that additional information, I've amended our procedure for coming up with a right or wrong answer. So the first step is now making sure we understand the question. And then we collect the information, analyze the information in order to consider the source and compare and contrast the information that's available in order to evaluate the most correct answer. So again, collecting a little bit more information, what we're able to determine is that George Washington was the first president of the United States, became president in 1789 under the Constitution. And the U.S. Constitution is what created the United States of America and the office of the president. And John Hanson was actually president in 1781 under the Articles of Confederation. And so basically looking at creation of the United States, but before the United States was officially created. And so John Hanson was a president of an entity formed in the Revolutionary War, but he was not necessarily, by definition, the first president of the United States. Okay, but what happens when we are looking at an ethical question, when we've got these ethical dilemmas, where there's no right or wrong answer, and we need to choose between two or more conflicting options? Based with this, when we have two or more conflicting options, basically neither is absolutely acceptable from an ethical perspective, and neither overrides one another. And so there may not necessarily be a clear answer to this situation that we're looking at. So in this situation, we're basically evaluating the rightness of two different options. And so we're comparing right versus right. And so it may be good for the long term under one situation, but good for the short term in another situation. It may be something that is good for the individual, where maybe we need to be looking at something that is good for the community. We may be looking at the relationship of truth versus loyalty, justice versus mercy, or in another situation, taking a look at the work-life balance. Do you do things more for the work end of it or more towards the life end of it? So, using the same basic idea of answering a right versus wrong question, we can take a look at a right versus right question. So we want to make sure that we understand the question, that we collect the information, analyze the information considering the source, comparing and contrasting the evidence available in order to evaluate what is the best answer for the given question or given situation. So in this case, instead of looking at who was the first president of the United States, we can think about who was the best president of the United States. So when we're asking these types of questions where there's no concrete right or wrong answers, there are going to be different viewpoints associated with it. And so in a Pew Foundation Research study done in 2021, taking a look at who is recognized as the best of the recent presidents, we can see that kind of over here in the red, among those that are self-identifying as leaning towards a Republican, they're going to be viewing presidents such as Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump as being the best of the recent presidents, where those individuals that are leaning more towards the Democratic viewpoint are going to be looking at President Obama and President Clinton as being more favorable, as being their view of the best president. So what do we do in a situation where there are, conflicting viewpoints? How do we come up with the criteria? How do we come up with concrete evidence to support the view as to which is the best president, in this case in recent years? And so another 2021 research study that was done, this case by C-SPAN, taking a look at presidential historians. And so a survey distributed to recognized experts within the field of presidential kind of history. They came up with 10 different criteria and then ranked the presidents based on that criteria. They've gone through and come up with, in this case, looking at all of the presidents, kind of a historical ranking. And you can see kind of various differences that have occurred when the survey was done in 2021 versus in early 2000. So again, when we're looking at the presence of no concrete right or wrong answers, we need to be able to make sure that we have good persuasive evidence that supports our point, and then use that evidence in the arguments that we're making. So please see the description below for additional information as well as references. Come back for the next set of videos in this, where we're going to start to look at logical fallacies and trying to avoid those in order to make strong arguments.